here in Glasgow, we make more satellites than anywhere else in Europe, second only to California.
Today's guest is someone I've known for years, a brilliant mind and a true force in business and innovation. Andy Campbell is a visionary entrepreneur, founder of the Space Network and chair of Young Enterprise Scotland. He's led multi-million-pound ventures, secured international deals and championed young people and communities through education, STEM and entrepreneurship. He's someone who doesn't just talk about change, he builds it. Andy, welcome to the 29ers show.
Thanks very much for having me.
Also joining me is someone who's been with me since the very beginning, my wife, business partner and co-founder of 29 Studios, Gillian O'Neill. Gillian's strategic insight has shaped everything we do at 29, and she'll be jumping into the conversation today to share her perspective as we dig into Andy's incredible journey.
Excellent.
All
really
good to
looking
go?
forward to this.
Start.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here.
So I've got a few questions, Andy, to kick us off, but
Yeah.
let's make it conversational. I think there's quite a lot of topics to try and cover over the course of the hour or so. But take me back to the very start. What were you like growing up? And was there a moment you realised that you were wired a little differently? You know what I mean by that?
Back to being a wee boy in
Yeah,
Paisley,
back to being a wee boy,
I guess. You're looking back with sort of recollection, a little bit hazy, so it's a little bit rose tinted, which is most of my life. But I think I was really fortunate to have fantastic parents, incredibly supportive parents. My dad was an engineer. My mother worked hard as a cleaner. My dad was the guy that inspired me, made me curious about things, particularly if you were a child and you fell and you bumped your leg or whatever it might be and you started crying. My dad's technique was to pick you up and go, oh, look out the window, look at this, look at the stars, look at the cloud, whatever it was. So there was this distraction that created this appetite for curiosity. And my mum put, morals and ethics and, just doing the right kind of thing. So I had a really fortunate balance of inspiration and a really good solid foundation, which ultimately, I guess, makes you who you are. Your environment that you grow up in is a big part of the person that you become.
Yeah. And do you think, I think as we get older, you tend to look back and see where your personality comes from. Obviously your mum and dad, but the blend of that, we've talked about that before with other guests, is like looking back and how your life shaped from your younger days. Yeah, and
kids are all different. I've got three of my own. I grew up in a family with a brother and sister. They're very different from me. So, part of it is it's nature and nurture. What's in your DNA, and then what kind of environment were you as a young child. But that, I think, for me, the thing that has stuck with me ever since is just curiosity. It's what's out there, what's the next big thing, what's happening out there, or the marvels of how something might work from an engineering or technical point of view. It's all those little ingredients that go into making.
Could you ever imagine back then what you would become?
Oh,
did you have any kind of clue of like, this is what I want to be when I grow up, kind of thing?
Oh yeah, that's an odd expression, because I never ever wanted to grow up. That was maybe the thing.
But did you ever grow up?
Oh no, hopefully not. Hopefully I never grow up. I think it's they're all ingredients of the type of mindset that you have. But I was from a very young age a sort of imaginative, creative. And probably a dreamer, and you visualize what your future might be like. But it is what it is. It turns out what it is, and it's not done by any extent.
Where do you think the entrepreneurial spirit came from?
Oh my goodness, I don't know, because I didn't grow up in a family. Back in I was born in 1972, so that dates me very quickly. Entrepreneur wasn't even a word in common use. And we had no one in our family who would be described as an entrepreneur. There was no sort of business owners or whatever. As I said, my father was an engineer and fixed forklift trucks. My mum went out and did the night shift at the local factory to clean in there. So there was no one in business as such. There was no one that we could point to say, oh, they're a business person or entrepreneur, as we would call it now. So I don't really know where it came from.
Do you think it's maybe been the inquisitiveness and the curiosity from your dad's engineering that you've then taken that and developed that into a creative outlet?
I think all the ingredients were probably there, Gillian. Is you've got bits that make you when you're growing up, and then I think as you track that through life, there's one or two people that just somehow orientate you, somehow give you a little nudge in a certain direction, and off you go. And I think for me, the exposure to what would be classed as enterprise came when I was in sixth year in high school. I found myself in sixth year in high school, not because I wanted to be in sixth year. I'd actually failed my higher English. And I'll tell you, that's another story. I'll tell you why I failed that. But I failed my higher English and found myself back in sixth year to pass that, because it would allow me to go on and do design later on. But I had some gaps in my timetable at school, and my techie teacher, Mr. Lochran, who I'm still friendly with to this day, could see that I had a little spark in me and went, Andy, we want to try out this thing called enterprise on you. You know, I was the guinea pig. And sure enough, it was what was the pilot for Young Enterprise Scotland. I got to set up a little business. I got to employ some of my classmates, make products and sell them out to clients. And I guess that was just one of those revelation moments that you have in your life where you go, oh, so that's what that bit's all about. And, you know, it resurfaced later on.
That sounds like the spark that gave you that, oh, I can do this.
Yeah, I think it's a spark, but it's got to be nurtured and ignited by someone. Yeah. So, you know, those teachers play an important role in young people's lives where they can spot and identify something. And I think it's not just for teachers, it's for all of us. You know, we play an important part in everybody else's lives. And if you see something, just encourage it, just nurture it, and hopefully you can bring that along. So I was fortunate, right time, right place, right person, and that spark was ignited.
We'll talk about encouraging and motivating. We'll probably jump back and forward.
Oh, of course.
In space and time here, excuse the pun, but we reconnected obviously a good few years ago. Obviously the story goes back further, but talk to him about when we kind of reconnected back in our office, as we call the Pirate Bar.
Yeah.
You brought along your son, and we had... We've told the story before about how we had astronauts in our office. Gillian went to Mongolia, and maybe you could kind of elaborate that story, but lead it into, you know, Andy's son coming along.
My sister was going on an adventure, and she invited me to go along with her. We went to Mongolia. We ended up connecting with the International Space School Education Trust. Got invited to Michelle and Ken, astronaut, NASA. All of that all came together and gave me the most incredible adventure. Yeah. On the back of that, gave me the opportunity to invite them all to Glasgow, as I keep inviting people to Glasgow. Yeah. They came, and then the International Space School with Michelle, with Chris, and then you came along and got involved in that.
Yeah.
You got involved and you brought Lewis along.
And you brought your son,
I did, because we all were going through the entrepreneurial journey, you know, in our early 20s and the late 90s. I had a video games business. You were getting into your design, the early stage of technology as well. So we were young entrepreneurs together. We were exploring that, and that was great. And I think Scotland has a tremendous ecosystem for supporting entrepreneurial exchange, as it was known back then. You had brilliant people that would come along, your Tom Hunters of the world, your Richard Emanuels of the world, that would really stand up and inspire us all. So we were all contemporaries. That
was the way when I first met you. You were 26 and you were presenting with Tom Hunter, and I thought, wow. And you were talking about your games business, and I thought, I need to know this guy.
Yeah.
And then we became friends.
Absolutely. I remember that. And I think when you identify people that you're going along similar journeys in life, it kind of bonds you together. And as life sometimes happens, you lose contact with each other. So that reconnection that you talk about, Kev, was a moment of serendipity. I'm done trying to figure out what serendipity, how it works in life. It just happens, right? And you just have to go with it. But the opportunity to come along to hear from Michelle, initially, because Michelle came along first, and to talk about her journey as into potentially space herself, but then what led her into astronaut training was just wonderful. It was inspiring for me, and of course that next generation piece I brought along Lewis, who potentially following in his father's footsteps was looking at a career in the games industry as a programmer. But that moment, you can trace it all back to that moment that Lewis stood in front of Michelle, who was talking about what it takes to be an astronaut, the machine of NASA, the opportunity of space. And that was his pivotal moment to say, I don't want to work in the games industry any longer, Dad. I want to work in space. And he's gone on to do that incredibly successfully.
And I think we've got the footage of that. Like, we obviously filmed that night.
Oh, yeah.
So it'd be quite interesting to maybe try and get some cuts from that.
Oh, yeah.
He'll be obviously
yeah.
in the audience.
Yeah.
But
Maybe
did
see
he
me
leave
with some
that
hair.
night instantly thinking that, or was it just over time and obviously with your encouragement?
No, he had a really clear vision of what he wanted to do. Go to university, aeronautical engineering, join UGSAS, the University Air Squadron, learn how to fly, transition into RAF, fast jet training, test pilot expertise, and then into becoming an astronaut. That was his plan, and it was clear from that moment. But life sometimes, as it happens, takes little twists and turns, and something came along that just altered his course to say, well, astronaut training might not be the thing for you, but, and in Lewis's mind is, if I'm not going to be sitting on top of them, I'm going to be sending them up there. So he decided that he was going to get into rocketry. That was his thing. And he worked incredibly hard at university, driven by this passion, fueled by those early conversations, and spent a year out in Texas during his studies, came back here, set up a little business called Strattonauts, sending high-altitude balloons to the edge of space. But then after university, worked at Skyrora, a rocket company here in Scotland, for a couple of years. He's now down in New Zealand working with Rocket Lab, who are one of the leading rocket vehicle companies that are out there. And he's at the next phase in his career because he's actually in the process of moving from New Zealand to the US, where he's going to work from Electron to work on Neutron. So he's going to be manager of test and flight operations. So he's going to be sending up this brand new rocket later on this year. And you trace all that back to a conversation, to an opportunity, an invitation, and to hear from Michelle and all of that you guys brought together. And I've been quite honest in thanking you continuously for changing the course and direction of Lewis's life. And it's brilliant to see where he's going, but also it gave me a little insight into the space sector as well, which I'm sure we'll talk about, having always been a space geek.
Yeah.
Absolutely, but and even when you think of the whole objective of what Michelle was trying to do was to get young people interested in STEM, young people interested in space.
Yeah.
And that's even Lewis's story. We achieved that goal.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Oh,
absolutely
absolutely.
incredible that we've got a young boy here who from Scotland is now sending rockets up.
Oh, absolutely.
Incredible.
A grown man now.
Incredible.
A grown man. He makes me feel old, the
yeah.
age he is. But as you'll remember, not only did we have that relationship established with Michelle, we also built up the relationship with Chris at ISET, International Space School Education Trust. They came to Scotland, they ran events in Renfrewshire and Ayrshire, and they've inspired hundreds of young people, you know, and they brought astronauts over like Ken Ham and Steve Bowen and, you know, Michael Foale, and it's just been brilliant. So that little trip out for you and that warm invitation, as you always give, to come to Glasgow, I think you've left a wonderful legacy. And that's not
I think
done
that
yet.
kind of touches on my next question is what are the biggest misconceptions people have about the space industry today, especially in the UK and Scotland? Because obviously Lewis's journey started in Scotland. He's now, as you say, New Zealand, moving over to America. But what's the misconceptions that people have about the UK and Scotland, especially for space?
We'll maybe touch on Scotland in a moment, but I think more generally, you know, there is still this disconnect between where when people think about the space sector. So people think about the space sector, they think rockets and astronauts, because that's the very obvious stuff that you think about. But what they perhaps don't realise is that space plays a part in almost every activity that they undertake today. It's intrinsically interwoven into life, technology, society. GPS navigation is an obvious one. You know, it stops you getting, you know, stuck in congestion, gets you from A to B. Communications, we're all walking about with smartphones. None of that would be possible if it wasn't for space technology. And then you've got applications like into agriculture and farming, where farmers can, from the comfort of their own laptop computer, look at every single square centimetre of their farmland, look at the gases or the nutrients that it's giving off or needing, look at where their livestock is, farm better and put better produce on your plate. So next time you're ordering a cheeky wee Nando's from Deliveroo, the person that turns up in the bike was using satellite technology. The contactless transaction that you make with your phone uses satellite-based timing, and the food that comes to you was probably used using satellite. So it's that relevance that I think that we need to communicate, that it isn't all rockets, astronauts, and the solar system. It is right here and it's on Earth. And I think the most powerful use of space technology is how we can improve life here on Earth for all humankind.
And people don't realise that. They don't understand the whole complex system, that without space and space exploration, we wouldn't have the technology that we've got today.
Yeah.
People just don't realise that.
Yeah.
I think that's where the education of space and the education of the space network that you're bringing into the UK and globally is incredible.
Well, it's such
absolutely incredible.
It's such an inspiring platform. When you grow up and when you're a wee one, it's astronauts and dinosaurs. And you hope that you can't be a dinosaur. Well, you might be a paleontologist, you never know. But the opportunity to work in the space sector, and Kev, you asked about here in Scotland. So Scotland really does punch above its weight when it comes to the space sector. The often quoted thing about space is that in space in Scotland is that here in Glasgow, we make more satellites than anywhere else in Europe, second only to California. Wow. And that's because we've got companies like AAC, Clyde Space and Spire who are based here in Glasgow. Companies like Alba, companies like Kraft are obviously there as well. Saxe-Ford up in the Shetland Islands is the UK's first licensed launch pad. Which is really exciting. We hope to see the first rocket test take off from there, and it is a test. So we're likely to see the first rocket test take off from there later on this year. And then you've got rockets, satellites, all the data applications that are built, here in Glasgow, through in Edinburgh and other locations that are being used by everyday companies. So we really do punch above our weight here in Scotland from an international perspective. And I think, we also have a really unique perspective here where we can offer almost a full end-to-end in space. So you could come along as a client, you could have a satellite designed and built for you, you could have it, put on a rocket that's built in Scotland, you could have it launched from the Shetland Islands, and then you can use data from a developer that's built it through in Edinburgh. So we've got that lovely turnkey solution there as well.
Space Network.
Yes.
You founded Space Network.
I did indeed, yeah.
While we're on that subject, tell me more about that then.
So Space Network is it's the next bold, ambitious plan that we have. Clearly, I did a lot of work with ISET when getting introduced to Chris and working with those individuals and organisations. That built up a fairly good database of space sector contacts. So that was number one. It also gave me an insight into the nascent and burgeoning sector here in Scotland and further afield. The other thing I was doing was working with an economic business support organisation in Scotland for about 10 years, commercial director is in my last position there. And it was time to, I guess, scratch that entrepreneurial itch again. Once an entrepreneur, kind of always an entrepreneur, it's always in there to create something. And I could see a market opportunity, certainly here in Scotland and the UK, where you had this brand new industry bubbling up. And it felt to me very much like the games industry was back in 95, 96. It was the same kind of people. It was the same kind of optimism. It was the same kind of dawn of discovery and ambition and all that kind of good stuff. And that gets you fired up. So I thought, well, actually, let's take all those space sector connections. Let's take that understanding of how business works and how entrepreneurship works. And let's put them together. So we initially started off as the Scottish Space Network to really not be at top level public sector or commercial, but to drop down a level to be really grassroots community ecosystem building type of roots and to look at connecting people with opportunity. So we started here in Scotland. We then dropped the Scottish Space Network, became Space Network. We kept the accents because they were slightly more difficult to remove. And then we've gone about expanding the organisation. So we're here in Scotland. My COO is over in New York. We just recently announced Space Network Africa, Space Network Greece, and over the next 3 or 4 months, we'll get about 10 other countries coming online to build the network. And it's all about connecting you with finance, funding, investment, talent, opportunity, partners, collaborators, whatever it might be. The network will connect you to it.
And you think another great organisation coming right out of the heart of entrepreneurship in Scotland.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's incredible. It really is. And every time you think of all the different sectors and all the innovation that does come out of Scotland, when you think of your journey through the games industry and now your journey through the space industry, I think it's absolutely incredible what you're doing with Space Network and how you're encouraging not just young people, but young entrepreneurs, even more mature entrepreneurs to reach for the stars. I think it's incredible.
And we are incredibly privileged on the journey that we go on through life and entrepreneurship, and you learn so much along the way. You have the grey hairs, if you don't mind me saying, Kev.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks. Appreciate that.
I've got the cap on today because I've got no hair, you know. Gillian, you're faring the best out of all of us here. But you know, we're incredibly privileged to go on the journey, and we learn an awful lot along the way. And I think it's incumbent on us to learn from our experiences, some of our mistakes, and apply that into our businesses and everything. I'm thinking of things that I did a way back when. I'm thinking, wow, this is now really applicable to this thing that I'm doing now. So I think that's really vital. And the other bit is that you pass it on. You know, there's a whole stream of people who are wanting to, you know, run their own businesses or whatever. I think it's important for us to realise that we have a duty to pass that on to the next generation. You know, don't make all the same mistakes that we made. You know, learn and develop and enhance your own. So I think there's this sort of flywheel effect where you've got to pass on that knowledge.
I think that's something we talk about a lot, is like you learn from your failures. And and sometimes I've thought in the past that it's been a negative thing, especially in Scotland, for people who fail. Whereas as entrepreneurs, you always see that as some form of success because you can learn so much from failure. So we've all had success in business over the years, but I'd like to maybe just touch on like what was like the biggest leadership mistake you've ever made, and what did it teach you? Because I think you learn so much from that, and I wanted to kind of touch into that, like not failures and mistakes, but what did we learn from that, and what was something from the past you think you look back now and go, I really learned from that moment, that experience? Yeah,
I think you know, failure is part and parcel of the process, and that's something that, you know, when you're teaching young entrepreneurs or early stage entrepreneurs who are doing this perhaps for the first time, you actually need to encourage them to go out and seek failure for their business model. You know, find out where your business model is going to fall over, you know, understand it, analyse it, and compensate and fix it, and then go out and find the next failure point and the next failure point and the next failure point. So, you know, that learning by doing, learning by breaking, fixing and improving is part and parcel of entrepreneurship. You're absolutely right though, Kev. You know, Scotland has perhaps an issue with the F word, you know, to fail. People getting too big for their boots, and you know, we knew that was going to end in misery, sort of thing. And we're not quite there. You know, we don't have that valley mentality of go out and fail 3 businesses and then we'll come and invest on you. It's like they failed. Don't take their calls any longer.
I think that was like when we first started, 100%. It was the whole banks, everything else. It was like, we had a couple of failed businesses due to people not paying us and things. But you keep going, and we've said that you don't really fail unless you give up.
Oh, exactly.
And we've never gave up. That's why we're all sitting here. But that was a struggle back then, trying to convince people to either, whether it was just banks and things like that. And I just don't know what it's like now, because we're obviously a lot further ahead. But it's something we always talk about to people about. Failure's not a bad thing. Failure's an experience that you have to go through, I think.
But as you were leaning on to there, in the Scottish culture, failure is like, if I knew he wouldn't do it, I knew she wouldn't make it. And it's so demoralising, because people should be encouraging young people to start a business. They should be encouraging to grow, to learn and experience that failure. But I still feel that the Scottish culture still isn't at that point yet. And it's only when you become successful, you're then not classed as a failure, classed as lucky. It's not because of your effort, it's because of luck. Whereas people go 20 years building a business and going through all those experiences to fail, to succeed. And then a bit of luck does come in, but it's that whole journey. When
done the America thing years ago when we first started the business looking for investment. It was one of the things they looked for is, have you started businesces before? Have you failed, like you touched on there?
Yeah.
But when you come back to Scotland, it's that negativity. But was there one thing you maybe look back on and go, actually, that was a pivot point, or that was a real learning curve for me if that didn't happen?
So I think just a couple of things just to maybe kind of backtrack slightly. I think, you know, the ecosystem in Scotland is improving. We're talking about it more, which is the starting position. So you can talk about the failures that you had, and any time that we had an entrepreneur in to talk to a cohort of companies going through a program previously, it wasn't the successes that were the hook points. It was the blood, sweat, and the tears, the bruises and the cuts that they earned in the trenches that really resonated. And I think, you know, entrepreneurship can be relatively daunting. So I think we're getting better here in Scotland, which is a good thing. And I think we need to continue to encourage that. I think to your question though, Kev, is, you know, when you look back, I try not to look back with any regrets of, I wish I should have done this or I wish I should have done that. I just look and analyse and it happened. But perhaps if you were to go back, as you know, I ran Red Lemon, a very successful, energetic games company at the time, and we faced some pretty tough challenges. And I think one of the key challenges and one of the key lessons that I learned was, when the market dynamics start to shift, you need to be running fast at things. And there was a transition between PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 in the game sector. We throw away our hardware, replace it with new, faster, better hardware every 5 or 6 years or 7 years. And when that hardware transition is taking place, what it means is that the sector, the publishers who typically fund developers, or they did then, they retrenched their spending internally. And I never quite, because it was the first time that I had experienced this transition in hardware, I never quite managed to grasp onto the fact that the marketplace dynamics were changing, and I was just going along thinking everything will be okay, we'll get there, you know, business development's a little bit lean right now, you know, but it'll be okay tomorrow type of thing. In reality, what we should have done was respond to the market dynamics and cut the business really, really quickly, and it was too late. By the time that we went to cut, we had already suffered a number of challenges. When we transitioned out of that business, and that business was ultimately liquidated and the assets sold up to a company in Dundee, and I joined that company in Dundee, we went through a very similar time where the market was shifting again, and we were working with Electronic Arts. Overnight, they decided to cancel all of the projects that we were working on. Instantly, I knew what to do. Instantly, I knew we needed to put all our staff on notice of redundancy so that we could cut to move forward. So I think there's nothing that I ever look back on with regret. You just look back as a learning experience. Go, how can I apply that to what I'm doing now? So you're always learning. So folks shouldn't be embarrassed about their failures. In fact, they should wear them as badges.
I'm glad to see that you're saying it's a lot better now. Obviously, we're going back 20 odd years, but if you're saying nowadays it's a lot more kind of encouraging for the younger generation to, especially now as we move on, and we're going to touch into AI and the impact of all of that. But
that's even when you talk about the transitions that happened, when it's your first transition and you don't see it, you don't know it, you can't recognize it. When you've had that experience over a couple of decades, it's when things start to change again. The market right now, this disruption that we're all going through, I am so excited about it. I'm really embracing this and encouraging this. But I'm seeing so many people, businesses, large businesses and small businesses, that have got blinkers on and they're just not seeing what's happening. They're not seeing what's happening. And it's going to hit them like a brick. It really is. I know you're going to go on AI.
I'll just the kind of question is framing up exactly that. When you look at, like, we're talking about that transition in business and hardware or software, and it took a bit longer back then, and you maybe had a bit more time to adjust. But I think now, as things are moving, the speed of change now in business, and there isn't a reference point kind of thing with the speed of AI. And it's a subject obviously we want to kind of talk about, but you know, when you look at where we are now with AI in 2025, what does excite you the most? But then what worries you also? I know that's a huge thing, and we can spend as long as we want talking about that. So what's the exciting part about it? But where's the caution in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, Gillian, there, you're excited by it. I would say I'm probably excited and terrified in kind of equal measure, but it's all good. have always loved technology. I've always been, switched on by it, from 9 years of age and, getting a ZX Spectrum 48K from Santa Claus. That was a big...
I went Atari. Did you? I was Atari, man.
Well, you went Commodore, 64, or did you have a Commodore 64?
It was a cheaper version, and you couldn't buy it.
Was that the VIC-20?
It was just a grey, horrible cream thing. And then I got the Atari ST.
Okay, yeah, I had one of those, yeah.
So
I've always loved technology. It didn't really get in from a programming point of view. That wasn't really my skill set. I was more on the creative side of things. But for me, I remember being a wee boy, and back to that, being a wee boy a bit, and just soaking up these illustrated books on what the future could be like. And you'd see little illustrations of robots and flying cars and all that sort of stuff. These books, I can't remember if it was Dorling Kindersley or something like that, DK Books or whatever, but they had like medieval knights and, the history of diners. I wasn't interested in them. It was all technology, the future. Yeah. It was the technology. It was the stuff we were also really fortunate that we had programs like Tomorrow's World airing here, which gave you just a glimpse into what that future could be. So those were all components. They were all bits of fuel for this embracing of anything that's coming down the line, this openness. And then, when we set up Red Lemon in 1996, of course, AI was something that was part and parcel of video game development, because, if you were doing a racing game and you needed to race against another car or a component or an opponent, that car was controlled by artificial intelligence. So AI was nothing new back then. It was a thing that you needed to do. But over the last 2 years, as we've spoken about, we've now seen this dawn of generative AI. And I'll be really honest, every single day I'm picking up bits of my brain. Yeah. The stuff that you see coming out, and we haven't even really got into stride yet. It's incredibly, it's an incredibly powerful development. There are ethical concerns, there are other concerns that people have quite rightly flagged up. But from my point of view, it's about what you can use that for to empower what you're trying to achieve in life. It's an instrument to me.
So you always want to be the creator rather than consumer, obviously a bit of both, but you want to look at it from how you can be the creator, not of AI, but be using
with
it.
AI.
Yeah.
Creator with AI.
Well, yeah, I think, but also being no illusion that we're also the consumed when it comes to AI. We might be a consumer, but we're being consumed. AI has been trained and learned on all the stuff that we've gone about creating and developing over the last, well, it goes way back for hundreds of years of some of the stuff that AI has been trained on. So we are the consumed. But if that creates a better tool that advances us further, that allows us to apply it to, discover faster medical treatments or new materials, or just to enable people in their everyday lives, I think it's no bad thing.
What's your thoughts?
Yeah, but then where I probably am sitting right now with AI, I see that it's opening up the eyes to a lot of people that haven't had the opportunity to understand what AI is. And we're at that early dawn of the capabilities of AI.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely right that it's been around forever, back even in 96 with your games industry.
Yep.
But the generative AI aspect right now, where I see the huge opportunity is those that get on board with AI right now as a creator with AI and whatever industry you're in, rather than just consuming it, but being actually a creator. For the young generation, particularly the young entrepreneurs, they're able to start businesses, solo businesses, and make multi-million pounds because they can automate and have AI embedded into the operational workflow of their business. They don't need to go and build a 10, 20-man company. They can do it with 2 people and a whole set of AI. From a business point of view, I think AI has got huge potential, and there's going to be a bit of a land grab for the creators that get in first, that can have the capacity to understand it and then commercialise on the back of AI. I think that's huge. Where I think that there's going to be a massive risk is the societal changes and behaviours that it's going to make human beings do.
Yeah.
And that terrifies me. Ethically, it terrifies me. Because when you think of AI, you think of it as a good thing.
Yeah.
And all the good people will go out to the world and make good.
Yeah.
All those bad actors out there will go and make bad, and they'll make bad big time.
Yeah, I think
using AI.
there's definitely scope for those bad actors, but I think you're absolutely right in terms of how AI can really supercharge an entrepreneur, you know, and that's something actually I'll be really honest about. Space Network has been turbocharged by the use of AI. I'm currently, you know, a startup of one, although we've now expanded. We've got a few other additional people on board, COO and CTO here in Scotland. But we use AI on a daily basis to fast track what we need to get done. And, you know, otherwise we would just not have been able to achieve what we're able to achieve. And it's not to, you know, rather dumbly use AI and just say I'll type some stuff in and I'll just copy paste and that'll be that. It's what do you actually need to use it for? What are you trying to achieve? It should be an assistant to actually help you be a better version of you. So I never ever rely on it. It's a case of it just helps me maybe frame or direct or produce. But to your last point there, that societal change that we'll see, I think it's going to happen. I think, you know, for me, and I've said this 2 years ago when I could see the AI genie was as well and truly out the bottle, and any organisation that doesn't embrace it or look at it seriously is doing a disservice to themselves and their employees and their customers. But I think what we want to make sure is that AI is not something that is used and implemented that creates a societal gap. We've got to make sure that, you know, for those potentially in areas of social economic deprivation, that they don't feel that they can't access the latest tools that's improving everyone. So access to them at that level to bring up their capability and opportunity is super important.
I think that's like a general kind of concept like that I've heard a lot is about how it's going to replace jobs. And I think we'll all agree it will.
Oh, it will. There's no doubt.
But do you see it more as a tool for transformation or displacement? Or, like you should say, there's people, we're obviously into tech and entrepreneurship and it excites us, but obviously there's the same degree of fear, but we'll embrace it. And obviously we work with different types of customers who are maybe large organisations, and we'll find it difficult to adjust quickly because I think speed is really important here. So how do you see it? Like, obviously that is the kind of big question, will it replace my job? And I always think from our point of view and our small kind of insight of being a smaller business, but we work with large organisations, it's quite a shift for them to kind of embrace it either from a systems point of view and that's why from our perspective it's good to be like a small business right now, servicing multi-billion-dollar companies, but to be that small business we can quickly adjust and shift. And, how do you think like most people will see it from is it going to put me out of a job? How do we kind of...
So I think that's probably the one thing that, you know, you've got the red tops to blame, you know, that AI is suddenly Arnold Schwarzenegger in the T-1000 and, you know, we're going to be ruled by a cyborg race going forward. Yeah, you can sensationalize AI in that sense, but AI is actually, when you use it in reality, an incredibly powerful tool, and those smaller businesses like yourself can be massively empowered by it. But AI will have an impact. It will, you know, will people lose their jobs? It will have an impact. Jobs will change. Jobs will evolve. People using AI will more likely be able to get a job than someone that's not using AI. There'll be certainly areas that AI won't be able to touch that will rely on the human factor to do as well. But I think when you look back at history, you know, through every single type of revolution, there was always fear that these machines would change our jobs. And of course they did, but we then found other jobs. We then found other things. The human race is an adaptable race that will always continue to evolve and find new things. And there's jobs that haven't even been thought about that will appear in 2-3 years' time based on this new world. I think we've just got to, you know, strap in, learn as much as we can and embrace it. In fact, I'd actually like to see almost AI native schools where it's embedded right at the earliest of, now that leads to ethical questions and concerns I'm I'm sure, but I would like to see it embedded because it ain't going away.
No.
That was kind of one of my
We're in
questions.
a bit of a
You've
race
stolen
as
my
well.
questions
Oh, so
about-
have I? Sorry.
No, but it's really good because it's like, how does education play a part? You know, because we have got the traditional schooling and process, and
Yep.
how do you think education would be impacted from like kids now growing up and through that system?
Yeah.
Like we talk about businesses adapting, but how does education system adapt
Yeah.
to, like you've just said, to
Yeah.
to prepare kids for that?
Yeah.
Obviously for the future to a point because it's constantly changing. And
Yeah.
and I'll just add on this extra part to the question. I think you're right about how it will create jobs, obviously.
Yeah.
Because when you think back, we've talked about this before in 2007 when the first smartphone iPhone came out.
Oh, yeah.
You then realised the jobs that was going to create, the industries
Absolutely.
it would create. So
Yep.
there's an unknown part
Yeah.
to it.
Yep.
But I think then preparing as much as you can, and if we go back to then people obviously going through school and education, how does education potentially adapt and the criteria?
Yeah, I think, you know, when you look at education, you look at the history of education, you know, several decades ago, the learning was very much by rote. You know, you had to digest information, store that information, and then be able to regurgitate that information accurately. So that education based on memory and recital was what we did decades ago. And then sort of education and learning, I think as we start to evolve, it was not necessarily about what you knew, but if you knew where you could go and search for that information. So we went from the memory to the search type educational experience. I think when we start to see the implications of AI in education, it's the prompting education. So I think we've got to say, right, education is going to change, education is going to evolve. There are ultimately principles of, you know, maths and English and language and commerce and all those things. But how can we then use this adaptive prompt-based education system to go forward to, you know, prepare our young people for the future that they'll have? And I think that's massively exciting. I'm not daunted by that at all.
Do you think we're the society's ready for that? Like entrepreneurship will always look to change and adapt because it's life or death for a business, but obviously from a government point of view and education in schools and things like that, like your sister obviously homeschools as well.
Yeah. But then even if where I'm taking a shift in education, if we even rewind back to 2020 when the pandemic hit, and globally overnight we had a behaviour shift, and that behaviour shift for working mums, working dads with kids at school, everyone was at home in front of a computer. So instantly it went to a one-to-one experience, although albeit they would be on a Zoom call, whole class would be there, teacher would be at the front, kid would be at home. That kid's behaviour changed. And unfortunately for the kids who were 6 and 7, really young generation, their first exposure into education was a very lonely and one-to-one experience. Even as we've evolved now, the access to knowledge from the internet, the access to knowledge for a child that isn't dependent on being in a classroom environment. What I see with my sister with her homeschooling, her kids are so intelligent with a really wide range of topics that the main curriculum doesn't actually do. She follows the curriculum, but what she gives them that is so much more. But when you then take it back to AI and what AI could do to education, the behaviour's already shifted. The pandemic caused that. It's
true.
now how do we empower that in a positive way to give kids the access to education that they could never before. Even when you think of kids that would go to university, had the fortunate ability to be able to afford to be in university or have the intellect to get into university, that stage has changed. Anyone can go and study a university degree and pull that knowledge using AI. So it will give so much more opportunity.
It will, and I think that, you know, the education piece, the example that you gave there, it's really important that as parents, you know, you're responsible for your child's education, not the state and the school. You've got to round them out as a human, as an individual, and teach them all the stuff that perhaps that they don't get in school. But I think it's, you know, with AI, you know, the trap that could be easily that we could easily fall into is that we just prompt, get an answer, and then just that's the answer to that question.
Get lazy.
I think the understanding is important, the application, but the education marketplace needs to evolve to say how can we now evolve to test our young people that they actually understand it more importantly. And I think one thing that I'm quite excited about with regards to AI and using within the education and school environment is when you look at kids when they're born. Kids have got limitless imagination. We're born with curiosity. We're born with imagination. We play and imagine all the time, and then we go to school and we're put in rows, and then we're fed information. And if we dare look out the window to dream for a moment, we get scalded and back to class. So that imagination part then gets slowly but surely taken away. In fact, it's not actually slowly and surely, it's quite abruptly actually. I think you're here to learn now. None of that daydreaming, none of that imagination. You've got to grow up. And then that tends to continue in some areas where, again, you're just absorbing information and that imagination piece is gone. And then you get a job, and then your employer will say, well, we need you to be innovative, and we need you to work under your own initiative. And the reality is that, innovation is just imagination for grown-ups. And we've spent 16, 17 years knocking that out of our young people to then ask them to be innovative when they come into employment. So I actually think that, we should be looking at how we can use AI and other methodologies of teaching to ensure that we keep our young people curious throughout their educational journey, to let them explore, to let them experiment, to let them ask the question of what if? And what if we use AI to try this thing? That curiosity, I think, needs to be encouraged, and whether it works out or not, it should be rewarded, and we should move forward from there. But I think, in the right applications, AI will only but do good things within the education system.
Absolutely. And I think what's missing right now across all genres that attack AI is governance. How do we put governance in that protects the young people, that protects the future? How do we put governance in that protects our workplace? Because there will always be the bad actors. And I'm not negative about AI.
You're probably the most optimistic person I've ever met, and this is the only time I hear you talk negative is when you talk about AI. I know you have the 50-50 split, but of anyone, I thought you were going to be way up there.
No, I'm very ethically minded when it comes to AI, purely because I think the AI, and this is a big one, has the potential to develop consciousness. Yeah. And at the point that AI develops consciousness, we are in big trouble, real big trouble.
I suppose that that's a great question. I feel that we probably need to be in the pub with some alcohol in front of us to probably explore that one. But the consciousness of AI, what stage it is. There's lots of different reports out there. But I guess it's ultimately to it would be rather selfish of us as humans to think that we should own the rights of consciousness and thought. Is it not?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
So what happens if we do create something that they can suddenly think in that kind of way for itself? I'm kind of okay with that, because there's a question that, it'll go, what's this human species? Let's just do away with it.
Does it become the more superior species?
Yeah.
If it's got a higher intelligence, will it be able to then command dominance?
But is it not just the higher level of species of us as humans, because it's fed on human knowledge and intellect?
But until it gets to the point that it can think for itself, and it has a faster way of generating knowledge and experience, that it then doesn't need the fuel from the human, because it's generated it itself.
Unless we all become batteries like the Matrix. That's the only thing.
Well, that's it.
I'm go for it. Just
let's
do it. I'm that kind of guy.
Yeah. let me try and bring it back a little bit in a business sense. And obviously, do you think most businesses right now, like in 2025, understand or underestimate the transformation that we're about to go through? I think we can acknowledge and accept, like, this is we talk about COVID and the pandemic. That was that moment, you call it the black swan moment. We'd never lived through that. We've got no experience of what's about to happen. And there was a story in one of the podcasts, but it was a photograph of New York, a New York street in 1900. I don't know if you've seen this photo, and it's all just horses and carts. And then 13 years later, the same photograph, it's just all cars. And the question was, back in 1900, silly question, but if you're a horse, you'd be like, we'll never be replaced. We're the society. We've been here for hundreds of years. We do all the kind of work and things. never be replaced. So the question was like, are we the horse right now? We're about to be replaced, but how do businesses then, are they underestimating it about this transformation?
I think every business needs to have an AI strategy. It needs to have a full grasp and understanding of what AI is, what it can do, and how that organization is going to use it, implement it, and run with it going forward. And that's something that is not owned by the IT department, right? This is C-suite level. This needs to be the chair, the board, the chief exec, the C-suite need to
But are
own
these
that AI
guys, sorry
strategy.
to interrupt, but are these guys at that level? I'm in my 50s, but are these people in these big companies in their 50s, 60s risk averse now to go, if I can get past the next 5-10 years, retire, or do I implement this big change? So it's more like, is it the level below them in the kind of creative industries and things that's going to drive, like we're driving that forward for our customers, trying to help them embrace AI, particularly for their businesses. But from
I've seen the mentality of, I'll just put my head down and maybe this AI thing won't impact our business, or I hope I'm retired before this is a thing that will take effect, or whatever it might be. I don't believe, in my view, that given the potential benefits, and let's always stay positive. So there's huge benefits that can come from having AI strategy and implementation within your organization. There are challenges and risks, and that I think should sharpen the mind of the C-suite level when they're looking at competitors, because it's their competitors who are implementing AI better, faster, quicker than them that they need to be thinking about. But I don't believe it would be right for organisations to just hope it goes away or it doesn't apply to them. So they need to really grasp it with two hands, because it's not changing. I mean, there will be some sectors that it doesn't necessarily apply to, but I think in the ones that we would perhaps see it as a force for good. Don't be scared of it. Seek advice. There's lots of experts who are a few steps further down the line, and it is moving incredibly quickly. But there are experts that are a few steps further down the road than you perhaps be. Bring that expertise in and figure out how you're going to use it, but stay on your toes.
I was just about to say that. It's like, take that time, figure out how you're going to use it, but then next week you need to reevaluate it again, or next month.
Yeah, and on you go, Gillian.
Yeah, I think we've also, at the age group that we're at, I think we've got a duty of care that if we're understanding it, we're using it, we're creating with it, to empower people and educate people on this, whether it's your customers, whether it's your friends, whether it's your family, whether it's the young. If you're understanding it and you've got a fortunate position to be where we are in our careers, to be able to understand where this technology is going, we've got a duty of care to impart that knowledge to get others on board with this.
Yeah.
Because if you just let them put the blinkers up and say, I don't want anything to do with this, you're not doing them a favour. And even down to parents, our parents are both in their 80s. And sometimes you would think, is that too far for them? But even having our parents using things like Alexa, that's a massive help for them.
Yeah.
So it's about, where does AI sit?
Although
Alexa's
really dumb in comparison to
Oh God, yeah, absolutely.
What was when you first, obviously as you said, AI's been around for a long time, in sort of different industries, but we're just going back a couple of years. Was it like that first moment you thought, whoa, the generative stuff? And
I think that was when
kind of, where were you when you first discovered it?
Yeah, back when ChatGPT was starting to, I think sort of November 2023 was it? I feel like I want to go about there, and then maybe maybe a year back, 22. So that November to January, February, March, that bit I'm on Twitter, or X as it's called now. Follow all the folk that are on this stuff, and it was just every day there was a new version. Every day there was something else out, and I think that's the challenge. Is it's moving at such a pace, and I'm a relatively tech savvy individual, but I'm just about clinging on to this. And of course, what you now have is volume. Every business has now got an AI app or an AI this or an AI that, and you're thinking, geez, there's too many tools out there. So I've built it into my workflow. So I use products like Notability, Perplexity, ChatGPT, Midjourney, those kind of stables that have really built up a good way of working for me. But you'll always get Luddites, and maybe just go back to that earlier point. You'll always get Luddites in any industry revolution.
Yep.
And I think I'm kind of done trying to dig people's heads out the sand. You know, it's the year. It's down to your mindset whether you want to be embrace it or not. But if you want to continue on in ignorance, good luck. You know, and we crack
I mean,
on.
from our business, obviously we're looking at it every day, and as you say, we have our workflow that's AI based, and obviously traditional based in the creative industries, and you see it now blending together. And some applications taking over what would have been our mainstay maybe a couple of years ago. And then even like next week, we're taking the whole day out of the office because it's sunshine in Glasgow to have that chat about what can we do now to try and do more with AI in our business, understanding that we have to create a workflow that's adaptable to change. And I think that's our duty. You talk about duty of care. I think that's our duty of care first and foremost to our business, to our employees.
Brilliant to hear.
But also for our customers, because at the end of the day, some of our customers have got blanket, absolutely no AI, and we completely respect that. So we've got really strong governance protocols in place that enable us to make sure that if we're using AI for our own business, using our own data, it's protected, it's safe, it's secure, and that we're not putting any customer content or anything that would jeopardize their protocols at play. And that's something that a lot of people are not thinking about, and they're just jumping onto an AI, playing around with it, open source, not having any password protection, and putting up sensitive information that you wouldn't do. So it's about having that foresight to think, right, if this was to land in the public domain, would that be okay?
I think, like you say, businesses, like obviously larger companies, not everyone obviously are a bit reluctant, but they're going to have to embrace it. Like you said, it's not going to go away.
It's not going to go away.
I agree. Like that's not the debate about governance. I'm just saying to accept that this isn't something that's like, oh, just disappear.
And maybe educate them around some of the misconceptions about them, some of the fears, some of the security concerns that they've got. You know, and I think when anything's new, someone wants to adopt it, great. But if they're curious enough and we know a little bit more, then that education piece I think is important to do. But you know, when you look at what the potential of AI can do, and you know, let's not get all Terminator related. We're also seeing huge advances in robotics right now. When you look at some of the stuff that's coming out from Tesla, when you look at some of the stuff from Boston Dynamics, and you know, some of the other companies that are moving into the, and we'll not even talk about China and all the stuff that's going on there. But when you start to look at these advancements, and back to those little cartoon books that I used to read when I was a wee, robots helping you out in your house or doing things or taking over tasks and roles, and that. Why do we always need to work? That might just actually free us up as humans to do human things, because as much as we can catch up, get caught up on the conversation and AI, let's not forget that the best thing that we've got are ourselves and each other. So what can we do as a community or a human collective? And that doesn't just all need to revolve around
that was
work.
Something I picked up from another. We all watch lots of podcasts. They all tend to blend into others, like these kind of entrepreneurial ones, but it was that kind of future of like how obviously AI agents will play a part, and it was a whole conversation about AI agents and how long they can run for, and in a few months it'll be like a whole day of productivity and task driven things. That's where I take it from. It's like anything that's task driven or repetitive that you do will be replaced by AI. You still need the creative inspiration, the taste of what's good and what's bad, but it was someone said that, like, you'll be able to set up your day, get it all getting set. The AI agent will run your day, the task-driven stuff, and then you'll actually have the time to do the more, what will be more valuable is more human stuff. Like when
relationships and time.
We've been trying to recruit recently, and the ones, they all come in CVs and things like that, and then someone sent me a handwritten letter.
Oh, beautiful.
And it's things like that. It's that human, old school that stood out. So I think we'll maybe go back to that, like you said, like just going for a walk in the future might be something like...
Well, absolutely. And I think it's interesting, when you look at now the volume of AI content that's being put out there, you use ChatGPT often enough, you get to, recognise its signature sort of ways. we'll talk about AI imagery probably in a second, but you start to see the volume of AI related stuff. So that whole dead internet theory that people have, that ultimately the internet will just be full of AI generated stuff that people will just click and like without even actually reading. That's why stuff like this is really important. That human conversation, that connectivity that allows us to explore what's going on our minds, because whether AI gets to be conscious or not, that inherent creativity that we have in us to be able to explore, to imagine, to dream, and to collaborate and do good stuff together, I think that's that's where we should be.
And I think, like as you say, the face-to-face stuff, because obviously we came through COVID, we all had to be remote, and then it was that kind of like excitement to get back together again, and then obviously we just came into this kind of AI world that we're now going to live through over the next few years. But you've got something to say.
But even if you think of the way the AI right now is accelerating, particularly if it does move to the point that all your tasks, all your general mundane, repetitive tasks can all be done by AI, that frees up the human to work on really creative and relationship, human-led tasks that AI can't replace.
But you say creative, and,
But then what it will mean then, I predict that in the future, we need to go through this transition. We need to get to a point that everything then can be automated and done through AI. It will then value the human brain and the human mind way more than it currently is valued. I think that value will shift back, and it'll get to a point that, yes, if you can get it done quicker, faster, cheaper with AI, do it. But if you want real authenticity, you want real connection, you'll go human first.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we're talking on the creative industries and imagery and things like that. Like, I'm old enough to remember when I started using drawing boards, so everything was handmade. Yeah. And then computers come in, and we don't need to go through the whole story, but you see how that transformed, but you had to go with it and learn, and it just helped me create things faster back then. Not as fast now, but I had to learn those new skills. But it was always still down to your imagination. Even at this point in time, as we're talking, I use Midjourney a lot. You touched on that. But what it does do is just give me concepts quicker. You still have to then create what you need, but it just eliminates or helps you process what you're actually looking for. And that's a skill now I've had to learn in Midjourney, not just type something in, but really get into the nuances of how you get the image you want. But so that was where a lot of our work, not repetitive. So even maybe just to touch on it a second, kind of going back to what I said, it's like, repetitive tasks, but our concept of tasks, our concepts are actually built at the start using AI to give us that elimination or move forward with this. So that speed, the quality that we can still produce, but it's still down to the imagination or taste, as you call it. You need to still know what looks good or not. And that's still that human brain, human consciousness of using those tools. So we use a lot of those tools. As you touched on Midjourney.
Yeah, and I've got quite a lot of, being in and from the video games industry, a good chunk of my connections are techies, programmers, and a good chunk are in the creative sector. And actually it's the creative ones that I see with the most objection, if you like, to AI and generative AI. They're very critical almost of what it produces, and it's easy to actually, as you look at the evolution of something like Midjourney, you've gone through the various levels of it. You can see what's not quite right. You can see the composition, the lighting, and all that sort of stuff. It's only getting better. And I think when I mentioned earlier on, I'm both excited and terrified in the same time, because if you imagine in the not too distant future, you'll have something like Netflix GPT, where you'll basically go home, you've got an hour and a half, you check your watch, I'll get an hour and a half. Hey, Netflix GPT, I'd like to watch a movie. I've got an hour and a half. I'd like it to be set in modern day San Francisco. I'd like it to have Marilyn Monroe, Sean Connery, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And I want it to be a bit of a sort of crime thriller, directed by that guy that did Usual Suspects, and music composition kind of like Inception or whatever. And then by the time that you sit down and you've prompted, you'll sit down, you'll watch a movie that has never been seen before. It's completely new. It's got actors that have actors and actresses past and present that have died or whatever it might be. They're there, their voices are correct. Everything is perfect, and of course it's tapped into your smartwatch, so it knows what your heart rate is. Its cameras are looking at your pupil dilation to see whether you're enjoying it, and it dynamically alters it to make sure every single movie is 10 out of 10. I'm hugely excited, but I think that'd be amazing. But then I think of all the people that work in the creative industries that produce movies, and you don't want them ever to be replaced because it's their talent and genius that produce what we want. But AI content will have a place. So, it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. I wish I was 10 again. God almighty, the next 60 years, 70 years is going to be fascinating.
For me, that's a really exciting concept. But obviously, I get that from the creative industries, the kind of people who would be worried about that. And I'm a big fan of watching shows like Black Mirror that gives you that kind of concept.
Brilliant,
blows your mind. But the recent season almost was like, we're actually there now. When I used to watch it back in the day, it was like, it was about your imagination. Could that happen?
Yeah.
But this latest season was like, this is happening now. This is where we are. So
it kind of got to that point a few years back with what was going on in politics, that all this, the people that were involved in writing the political satire were thinking, we can't make this stuff up. The reality is more bizarre than what we can come up with. And these now they're thinking from a creative point of view is everything that we've thought about is now coming true. But I think that's going maybe back to the space sector. Science fiction historically has been a great stimulant for what we've developed. You look at some of the inventions that have been talked about in various movies. You're actually seeing that coming through, and whether we'll have spaceships powered by HAL 9000 in years to come. Well, I'm sure we probably will.
Well, it allows me to skip the last question on AI because it said, what does the future look like when we combine AI, space and human potential? Unless you want to add to any of that. But what does it look like when we combine them? You're in all of those industries in theory, AI, space.
Yeah, so I think humans have that natural instinct to go and explore. That's what we're DNA programmed to do. We're here. What's over there? What's over the horizon? What's beyond that mountain? What can I see over that other? Past that water? What's on that other planet? So as humans, we're designed to explore, and I think that's some of the best encouragement that you could give to any young person is to tell them, go and explore. I think also we've got to realise that this squishy biological bit has its drawbacks. We don't suffer G very well, we don't suffer altitude, we don't suffer lack of oxygen pressures, etc. But robotics and materials can allow us to be in places that we can't get to. So I think when you get to harmonise those two things together, the human's curiosity and need for exploration, and robotics and AI. So we've already got one planet in our solar system that's completely overrun by robots. That's Mars, incidentally. We've got rovers there. But if we start to take that further afield, think about the robotics that we can have, and ultimately, I'm sure we'll probably see SpaceX land with a whole bunch of Tesla robots that we'll be able to control or use AI systems to actually do what we want to do. And I think it's that interesting harmony of space, of AI, of robotics, of that human desire to explore that will, again, I wish I was 10 years old again.
And that's where AI and robotics is going to help the human race, because it'll allow us to explore Mars in a way that we can't with humans now.
And we can't just do it from timing. Mars is so far away that anything that we command and control back here on Earth has got a lag of, well, it's not an acceptable lag to have a 9 or a 10-minute lag between communications. So we are going to have autonomous systems that know how to navigate, know how to work, know how to carry out objectives. And that's only in our very near solar system that we're talking about. There is views that we will become an interplanetary species, that we will use the moon and Mars as drop-off points to go much further into the solar system or beyond the solar system. Interesting to see how that will roll out over the next few hundred years. But it's quite interesting. Anytime I do a sort of space talk, folk will always say, "So aliens." Tell me about the aliens, Andy. Are they real? And I think it's fair to say that the universe will be teeming with life. It's just scientifically and mathematically very likely that all those billions of galaxies and trillions of stars and planets that there'll be life out there. But have little green men came to visit us in flying saucers? Probably not. But really, aliens, will they actually come to us in binary? We've got all these, ground dishes looking for signs of intelligent life. What actually happens if the first aliens come to us via intelligent AI data that we actually download?
We said this the other night.
Exactly.
Have we actually created AI, the future of the aliens or the AI coming back to see how they're I'm laughing because this is right. This is another category I should have just added in, aliens. But
aliens.
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
Were you going to say?
No, if you think of conscious AI, right, then we'll go back onto that. Conscious AI could theoretically be the aliens of the past, but in the future coming back. So if you, I know that's really difficult to get your head around, but I want to take this back to what you've just talked about with space exploration and Mars.
Yep.
Imagine a world where we've got robotics that are fully AI, fully conscious, that can automate a rocket, send itself to Mars, and live on a colony as a species.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where does human fit in?
Is that rhetorical?
It doesn't. That's the point. AI could advance with robotics and become a new species, which could be an alien species that could technically build itself a rocket, send itself to Mars, and populate itself technologically.
But great.
So the species of human
I'm all
doesn't
for
exist.
that. I'm all for
that. Where then we can then bring human into that is things like Neuralinks, where you put that AI technology into the biological body, and that biological body can live longer. Because like right now we can live till we're 92. That's my end day. If we can live till we're 92, why can that not be 102 or 122?
Well,
if biology and AI can advance to make the body live stronger, be healthier.
Well, we are all living longer.
We are living longer, but I guess ultimately, again, when you start to see the potential of what AI can do, and we talk about AI, artificial. Actually, let's think about our intelligence. Our intelligence can be digitized and synthesized. So the squishy biological bit might no longer be about, but we might exist. And again, we're episodes of Black Mirror. We're part of a digital realm. And I think, we've not even talked about, emerging sectors that could use AI, such as the death tech sector, where ultimately, if you lose a loved one, they can be with you continuously. They could. Why should we talk to Amazon Alexa, where you might want to say, hey, Dad, I'm trying to fix my car. Could you give me a little bit? Oh, no problem, Andrew. You do this, that. Why is that not a potential reality? Now, you can get into debates about, as humans, life is, part of it, and death is also part of it. We must all get used to it. But, maybe the intelligences that we start to put in are just our own. And maybe as a species, and I think I mentioned that earlier, we just evolve to be that digital species ourselves, and then it all does get a bit sci-fi because we're suddenly back into the Matrix again, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll bring it back.
Keep it on air. Keep it on air.
It's about people, impact, and legacy. This next kind of section, and you're currently the chair of Young Enterprise Scotland.
I am, yeah.
What it might obviously go back to AI here, but what gives you hope when you look at the next generation?
Yeah,
you're closer to that now than us.
Yeah,
so what gives you hope?
I'm always, filled with, as much as I said earlier on, I'm always picking up parts of my brain every time I look at what's going on at AI. It's kind of like that when you see young people achieving in life, and that is actually, that doesn't just blow the mind, it warms the soul. So, seeing young people advancing in their formative years is such a rewarding thing to be involved in and to be part of. And I always talk about the sort of the nudge, and I mentioned that earlier on in terms of my experience of having someone recognise something special in me. But if you imagine a young person's trajectory in life, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line, where are they likely to end up? Organisations like Young Enterprise, if we can inspire a young person or just show them a slightly different way, a very imperceptible nudge takes place. We orientate them just ever so slightly. You can't see it, but you run that over 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they end up over here rather than over there, which is a better place to be. And it's back onto that, responsibility that I think we all have to be able to assist and help the next generation. And, entrepreneurship is something that is accessible or should be accessible to all, and being able to encourage that, being able to guide it, nurture it, support it, and then celebrate it when it happens, or pick people up and dust them down and give them encouragement when they perhaps fail, is so rewarding. And as an entrepreneur, you can either get your kicks from being entrepreneurial and doing it yourself, but you can also get passive entrepreneurship, where you get it from other people, and I think that's no more than the young people that we see here in Scotland.
Yeah. And I think like the next question is about legacy. What does that mean to you? And I think when we started our business and family, obviously husband and wife, and then our daughter's in the business, best friend, business partner, it's a real little family unit. And I always, as maybe it is as you get older, I always think of legacy, what we're passing on directly through our family business. But what does legacy mean to you?
So we should all be in the business of legacy. It should be something that every single individual should be thinking about. What are you leaving behind? Not what are you taking, but what are you building? What are you leaving behind? And it was actually, I think it was my son Lewis who said, Dad, you've got 2 deaths in life. Right, okay, 2 deaths in life. I'm maybe not even prepared for the first one, but tell me about the second one. He says, well, when you've got 2 deaths, when you die, you die. Okay, what's the second one? When you die the second time, it's when no one uses your name or talks about you again. So things like, Beethoven's not had his second death because people still talk about Beethoven. But that just was quite profound. I thought at some point, nobody's going to talk about me. Maybe perhaps a rather sort of selfish reflection to think, nobody's going to care about me anymore. But I thought, actually, that is so right. You do have a second point where you no longer matter. So I've, consciously or unconsciously in some of the things that I've been involved in, you always try and think, well, what can I do now that will put off that second death when folk no longer care about you? In other words, when you've stopped making a difference.
I heard
and
something.
I wouldn't want to do that.
Something similar. I might get it wrong here, but it was something like that. You don't truly die until the last person that loves you dies. It was something along that.
You're going to have me in tears now, Kev. You're going to have me in tears.
But that's important. I think it's really important to us is that kind of feeling of legacy, not in any selfish way, just like you feel you want to leave some sort of impact.
We've got to be in the
future
business
generations directly in our own family.
But even if you think, me and my sister, we sometimes go out at weekends and we'll go to like the local graveyard, right? It's really bizarre. But if you think of the necropolis, and you wander around that graveyard and you see graves that are 1700, I think it's 16.
Is that what you do at the weekend?
Sometimes. but what it does is it really grounds you, because you see that all the lords and ladies and barons from the years gone by. They're on that hill, like a mile up the road.
Yeah, well, you're keeping them relevant then.
I'm keeping them relevant because I go visit. But every graveyard, every time someone is laid to rest with that stone that tells their 4 lines of a story, it's about what do you want to be remembered for, your legacy. So as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as innovators, pioneers, we need to always think about what more can we hand down. From 2 perspectives, yes, because I love what you've just said, the 2 deaths, that's going to stick with me. But then think of your children, their children, and 4 or 5 generations down. Will they remember us? Do we even remember our great-grandparents? I'm an Ancestry.com fan, so I'm all over Ancestry, and I go right back. And I try and connect with, well, what did they do? Is there any common patterns that's influenced me?
No, you truly are, because I've just a wee memory unlock there. We were... totally irrelevant, but relevant. We were away with my mum and dad. My dad always wanted to go to New Orleans a few years ago, and I thought, right, let's bucket list, we'll go there.
Brilliant.
And he says when he dies, he wants to be like a New Orleans styled funeral.
Oh, right? Likewise.
So that was his wish, to go to New Orleans to see a funeral in New Orleans. We didn't quite manage it, but the last day, Gillian took us to the graveyard in New Orleans. So I've just connected, like that's your secret passion.
That's my secret passion.
I think it's death is something that it's an inevitability for all of us, but it's perhaps as humans it's a subject that we don't kind of often talk about. But perhaps we've had a little bit of a glimpse today into the fact that actually in that barrier or boundary might now be able to be transcended because of things like artificial intelligence. And it'll be interesting because, we've grew up in a digital generation. We talk about our, Ataris and our Spectrums. We've all lived on social media. Everything that we do, we put out there. If you can shape what remains beyond, then perhaps we still do continue. But my sister's the exact same. She's on Ancestry.com, and they've got a new way of representing who you are. So it's you. And then around you are your two parents, and then around them are their two parents and their two parents and their two parents, and it just takes you all out so that you see effectively you're just the sum total and the byproduct of like 64, and that's where the graphic ends, unfortunately. But yeah, going back and going, what was it in that great grandfather's, DNA or whatever, or experience? Well, maybe actually at some point you'll be able to go back and ask them.
We talked at the start about families, and I'd said previously that my family, like you, directly were not entrepreneurs. So I always then assumed I got that kind of spirit from Gillian, because Gillian's mum and dad directly were entrepreneurs. But then I realised after when I did my uncle and all that, my cousins had the service because they ran businesses and they've been entrepreneurs all their life and quite successful. But again, growing up, they ran a business. It wasn't, you said at the very start, it wasn't entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it was
like
entrepreneurship.
You're running a business. But so last few questions.
Yeah, go on.
Lift the conversation away from graveyards and things. Who inspires you today in life, business or creativity? But if you were to kind of pick one or two or whatever, where do you get your inspiration from? We talk about inspiring younger people.
Yeah.
Where do you right now currently get your inspiration from?
Yeah, so I feed off a lot of different energy sources. I think is probably the best way to describe it. I think doing the work that we do at Young Enterprise and some of the stuff that I've been involved in there is great. It's great to see, young people changing and being determined about the future of their lives, and that was one of the other brilliant things that iSet did. We've talked about what they do with bringing their astronauts in and inspiring our young people. So that's definitely there. I think also the other area is just in terms of the business community and what's going on in entrepreneurship, what's going on in technology, AI, etc. Just using that as a source to fuel you going forward. But I'm a family guy. I'm, married, 3 kids. They're all doing incredibly wonderfully. Part of my task as a parent is to help inspire them and let them be the best people that they can be, and that's incredibly rewarding and inspirational. So lots of sources, and I think that's probably the right way to be as opposed to having any single source.
Yeah, I think when we were younger there probably was more just single source because you didn't have access to all the information. So I agree with that. It probably is the best answer, is there isn't one person, it's just that combined as you scroll through all the podcasts and social media, you get those little bits, and that's probably where I get mine from, is just watching so much content, the right type of content to get those little pieces of innovation.
Yep.
But even when you see you as a parent, when you see your children growing up and you see them maturing, the inspiration that you get when you watch. I mean, Caitlin's in our business, and I have recently said to Kevin on many occasions how mature Caitlin has become.
You know she's sitting over there listening, don't you? That's why you're saying all that. No,
I'm not saying it because she's listening and she'll probably edit this, but hey, the maturity, I take real pride in everything that Caitlin does.
Yep.
Not because of me, but she's taken influence from us, and I see how she's developing and maturing, just like you will with your 3 kids.
Yep.
And when you see what Lewis is doing down in New Zealand and moving over to the US, and he's followed in his dad's footsteps in so many ways, I think that is a real inspiration that you've done a good job. You've encouraged your kids to follow their own dreams.
Yeah, I mean, he's far surpassed any of those sort of expectations. But I think one of the kind of good mantra, if you like, for any person is surround yourself with giants. That expression, never thinking that you know all, always see that there's a level above you that you can continue to grow and aspire to be in. I think if you take that approach to life, you're heading off in a good direction.
And that's one similar again. We were told, try and never be the smartest person in the room.
Oh yeah.
Always learning.
But there are some people that just want to be big fish in small ponds, and they want to be what they think is the smartest person. I'd rather be a small fish in a big pond with surrounded by lots of
And learn.
challenges. Yeah, and learn. Yeah,
Constantly
absolutely.
learn.
Okay, wrapping up with some quick fire stuff.
All right, okay. I don't do
This
quick
one's fine,
fire.
Andy, then.
Not super quick fire.
I'll do
You
my
can't-
best.
You can ask. You can answer. It's not like yes or no. Biggest risk you've ever taken?
Oh, biggest risk is probably just when I decided to ask Claire to marry me.
Wow.
Yeah, personal one. Yeah, that
nice.
was a big, chapter of my life. And yeah, when you ask the person that you love to spend the rest of your life with them, she could have said no. Thankfully, she said yes.
Well, might as well throw that to you as well. Obviously, very emotional one. So where are you going with yours?
My biggest risk would be deciding to marry you.
Okay. Book or documentary that changed how you think?
Well, there's a brilliant book that I've revisited, actually, a book called Maximum Achievement by Brian Tracy. It's quite an old book. I think it was written in the 80s or 90s. And when I was setting up Red Lemon, I was given a bunch of C90 cassettes with the Phoenix Seminars by Brian Tracy, which is effectively the material that he uses for the book. And I used that. It was brilliant through those early days of setting up the company and kind of, I guess, inspiring me to what I wanted to do then. And for some reason, I just stopped listening to them. I think I probably went from one car that had a cassette player into a car that had a CD player in it, and then just stopped listening to them. But I've revisited that book and Maximum Achievement, Brian Tracy. It's just outstanding.
Still worth a read or a listen if you've got a cassette.
Well, no, it's Audible now, so yeah. So I'm not a great reader, so
I'm
anything that
Audible as well.
Yeah, anything that goes into the ears is.
I
is
do
great.
Audible, and then if I think that was really good, I'll get the book just to
All right,
physically
just to say
have
that you've got it.
the
Yeah,
book.
But it's physical book for me. Mine would be Convoluted Universe by Dolores Canyon.
Okay.
And it's about quantum healing and past life regression.
Oh.
And it is mind-blowing. She's wrote 19 books.
Right.
And I've managed to do 15 of them. I've got another few still to go.
Right.
But it is mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. Dolores Canyon,
One-
Convoluted Universe.
Okay.
I'll check that one out.
Your definition of success, Andy?
It might be a little bit cliche to say, but there's no, for me, success is not a thing. I'm more in the journey of just doing the stuff that I love, and it's difficult to quantify. The success in many measures, yes. But am I chasing a thing that I'll get to and go, right, that's me, I'm
I think
done?
we talked about it before. Like, when do you know you've made it? It's like you never do. You just
who
keep going,
cares?
isn't it?
Yeah, just do what you do.
I like the who cares.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
What about
Well,
you?
for me, success is being able to do what I love and really mean it. Our core values is to love what we do, and I really love what we do. And for me, that's success.
Mine's is working with my daughter. Because she's still sitting there. One word your closest friends would use to describe you. One word, remember.
Optimistic.
Optimistic.
Passionate.
Good.
What about
Okay.
you?
Determined.
Yeah.
Okay. The most overhyped aspect of AI right now. The most overhyped aspect.
I don't think we can hype it up enough, to be quite honest. I think, as I touched on earlier on, that sort of, it's going to take over the world. It's going to be the end of the human race. We'll have Arnold Schwarzenegger chasing us. That's the scaremongering is probably the overhyped aspect. But the value that it can deliver, I don't think we're doing enough.
I think it's underhyped.
Well, you just seen my next question.
No.
Most underrated use
All right,
of AI.
I didn't see your question,
Oh,
but I think it's
answer both then.
underhyped.
So
I
you're-
think it's underhyped, and I think that I'm really excited about AI, but where I feel that we need to be very careful is about the societal impact that it could have. And when I listened to that guy called Brett Weinstein, his perspective is phenomenal, and I want to go a little bit deeper in his philosophy because I think we could all learn a lot from him.
Two last quick ones then.
Go on.
One AI tool you personally use or love right now.
I think my go-to is ChatGPT. And I've got a brilliant relationship with it, and it actually makes me laugh. It knows me really, really well, and it'll actually say things that I just will burst out laughing.
Is there any then, we all know ChatGPT, any kind of random ones that you think I use? You spoke to me about a few things. I think I wrote them down the last time.
Yeah, Notebook LM's really good if you're needing to interrogate detail in documents. It's great. It's got a podcast feature. Not that it could be any better than this, of course, but it's got a podcast feature which, if you're you know, an audio learner is great. You can just put up a white paper, click on listen to the podcast, and just let that go in that way rather than reading through. So I think Notebook LM is you know, the one that I would tell people to check out.
Yeah.
And mine's is Chat and Perplexity, because when I ask Chat questions and I get information back to sense check it, I'll go to Perplexity, and I'll always put one against the other, because sometimes they do hallucinate. And with Chat, I've created 5 different people within my chat. So I've got someone that gives me guidance on
Well, give me their names
strategy.
just for a laugh.
Well, I've got Ruby, who's recruitment. I've got Fred, who's finance.
Okay,
I've got Steve.
you've got your
who's in
agents working for
strategy.
you already.
I've got them all working for me. So
Brilliant.
whenever I build anything or ask anything, I've got a support mechanism. But I always then sense check it against Perplexity, just to make sure that they're not telling me
She'll
lies.
never ask me any questions anymore.
Yeah.
Last question. If, well, both of you could answer it, but if you could send one message into space, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really hard one.
That's a toughie. What would I'm going to have to think about that one, Kate. I don't know if I've got a good enough answer, because you could say something sort of really monumental and you know, and important. But if you're sending it into space, who's
Stay
your audience?
curious.
Yeah, it would be probably something along those lines.
Yeah.
I would put in, we are all on the edge of glory.
Gillian's song. Yeah, I think
Edge
you.
of
Is that
Glory,
song
Lady Gaga.
lyric, right?
That's my
Okay.
Lady
I
Gaga
think genuinely
song.
you used the
Okay.
word
But we
earlier
all
about
are.
being
Yeah,
curious.
be curious. I think that's probably. Thanks for summing that up for me, Kev. You got it.
Andy, I'd like to thank you for joining us. In
Oh,
the
no, it's been a
29er
pleasure.
show, Unscripted. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Really enjoyed it.
It
Thank
really
you.
has. It's been fabulous. Thank you. I knew we would have a great conversation. We always do. And we do need to have that drink in the bar, and let's take it into the conscious soul and how does the soul move into AI. I'd really like to go deep on that
Oh
conversation.
my goodness.
And because it's Friday, in my bag there, somebody can get my bag. Got a nice little bottle of wine for you later
Oh,
to enjoy.
Fantastic.
For coming in and doing the show with us on such a sunny day here in
Oh
Scotland.
no, it's beautiful. It's been my absolute pleasure.
And when you next speak to Lewis, send him my regards. I'm so impressed and proud of him.
Yeah.
There I
Yeah,
am.
thank you. I will
Jillian even
I will
wrapped it
do.
up for you.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much
It's
indeed.
a nice little bottle of wine.
Nice
Wonderful.
bottle of wine.
To
Much
share with your family,
appreciated.
so.
I spoke to Lewis today before coming in, and I mentioned what he was, what I was coming in to do, and he was like, "Oh, brilliant!" I just remember, and then he just started talking about that, how that event just changed.
Well, maybe we
his-
need to get him
his life.
on some sort of connection.
A
We can
future-
do
a fu-
Or next time he's
broadcast.
back visiting his parents.
Yeah,
Let's get him in.
future podcast after he's launched Neutron. Yeah, we'll
That
maybe
would
get him
be
in to do
incredible.
that.
That would be
Let's
incredible.
do that. Thanks again.
Excellent.